I was successful 18 months ago with the Develop Your Creative Practice application. And I'm literally going to talk you through the whole application and the questions and tell you about various different kind of experiences from successful applications that I know from artists as well. So I'll be coming from it from a curator's position as an art worker, and then I can tell you also about successful applications from artists. So kind of hopefully sort of crossing the broad sort of spectrum of various sort of kind of practitioners here on the Zoom today. So we'll do that for about half an hour. I'll talk for about half an hour, and then we'll open it up for questions. I'm going to start with a point to, I think, set this within a context of kind of reality. And I'm doing this because it's important to really think about putting the time, effort into writing an application and it being either successful or part of a journey to actually kind of thinking about different areas in your practice. So currently there is about a 10% chance of being successful. So you take that from the amount of people in this Zoom, that's actually a handful of people. I say that with absolute respect for your practice, and it is in a highly very challenging time to be practicing as an artist, to be practicing as an independent curator, to be working in a cultural institution. So, I'm here really today to be able to kind of help you think about what that application looks like, what it can achieve for you, and how you can kind of think about your practice with that kind of step change that you really, really want to kind of see in your work and your career going forward. The date is the 18th, isn't it, for the next application? And then sort of kind of guessing that the sort of next dates for the round when they'll open would be April, May, I think, the next round. They never publish them, but this is me just kind of with insight into the funding. I think it will be April, May, September, October. And then October, I would imagine, is the last round of this four-year application process from the Arts Council England. They've obviously increased the amount and opened it up for different art forms and kind of increased it. So music, DJs and kind of different kind of practitioners in various other art forms can apply as well. But I think for this year only, it's really increased to the amount of that they've invested into the funding. And I think from my understanding from Arts Council England is that going forward with their priorities, that the pandemic is obviously going to be at heart of supporting the arts and the kind of cultural infrastructure try and survive through this time. So I think just bear that in mind, that there will be more opportunities in the future to apply for Develop Your Creative Practice and perhaps other strands of funding that might come online. So the difference between project grants and Develop Your Creative Practice is that project grants is very much for an audience-based interaction. So if it is, you're an artist working in an artist-led space and you're doing a project there, you're talking to effectively to an audience in your community. or you're a socially engaged artist and you're working in different areas of a city or rural areas, that community is your audience. So if you're actually kind of going to do a project in the public realm, in a gallery space and test ideas, that's for project grants. DYCP, Develop Your Creative Practice, is entirely for the investment of you as a practitioner. It doesn't have any outward facing experience. It is not for the consumption of an audience. It's for your step change and career development. And that's the really critical thing to think about in Develop Your Creative Practice, is that it's about that shift, that pivot of how you're going to kind of progress and develop in your work. So I'm going to run through my application. And first of all, I'll give you a kind of overview of what I applied for. And being a curator that had experience of working in an art centre and then running a festival and working in sort of sector support organisations, and then in Plymouth, and then moving to New Zealand for 3 years to gain some international perspective and kind of different experience. I came back to the UK with a bit of a kind of sense of, what do I do next? So I spent a year really thinking about Develop Your Creative Practice and applying for it. I actually spent that long thinking about my application because I didn't have the sort of essence of really what I could achieve out of it. And it took me a year by attending talks, reading, thinking about my background and my career and where I wanted to go. And I think for me, that kind of space and time just enabled me to really sort of kind of pin it down as well. Some people it takes a longer, sometimes people it takes, shorter kind of experience, time. It depends on kind of how you work. I started to kind of write to the people that I wanted to work with, the mentors, the organizations, and they gave me feedback of saying, yes, we'd love to do this. And we started to frame a program together. So actually I had something really real to kind of write about. I applied for just under £10,000 to develop my curatorial practice. And I applied for the funding to allow my time to pay myself a fee to work with experts and professional curators and artistic directors in my field of interest, which is socially engaged art. If I take another example of an artist who was successful in the first round of Develop Your Creative Practice, and an artist that I helped sort of mentor and discuss their application, and this is when I was kind of doing sort of consultancy work, they wanted to shift their practice from working in, they'd been asked to kind of put forward proposals for a public art commission. But that public art commission, I think for the artist was such a huge idea without actually kind of really having experimented, being in a position to kind of research, developing ideas. So they wanted to develop looking at certain materials, how to use those materials in kind of sculptures and installations in the public realm, and to work with specific craftspeople and designers in that field. So that was kind of, I think, a sort of interesting sort of opportunity for the artist that was successful with their application, because they knew what was sort of kind of hindering them, what was holding them back, what was kind of what they knew that they had to do to move their practice forward. So the first question, tell us about yourself and your creative practice. Two parts to that. I included in explaining about myself that at the time I was a consultant and a curator, and also leading the Visual Arts Southwest part-time. And I think it's important to kind of explain that rounded overview to the reader, because you're telling them that your kind of your day-to-day life is filled with other things, as well as being an artist, as well as being a curator. So it's important to kind of, explain the full representation of kind of what you do and who you are. And it's important also to express, I think, that passion in this question is kind of really, really telling the reader how your passion for what you do. So I kind of articulated it in a way of saying, I'm incredibly passionate about how arts can transform society. So this is the nub of my application, in fact. This is where I wanted to kind of pivot as a curator to really understand and research socially engaged practice and have experts fuel me with ideas and experience so I could actually make that step change in my career. I think the point of this question is about giving as much as rounded kind of picture of who you are, your passions, and also your experience to date, that then will reflect further in the application and what you want to do with this funding. So then from that kind of nub of passion, I explained projects that I've been involved with, telling them about myself, organisations that I'd helped develop from socially engaged arts, to kind of crossing agendas of arts, health and well-being as well. And also kind of being involved in working with artists and curating and commissioning different types of exhibition making, and also artists that I've worked with as well. So I gave them a kind of picture of who I am. And then I obviously did the kind of classic, I've worked here, I've curated this exhibition, but also kind of led on from that to kind of linking it back to that kind of the core of the application, my passion in mental health. The three parts in telling the reader about the development opportunity, what you want to undertake, and what you hope to get out of it, and how you will go about it, are all different kind of, I suppose, parts of a question. So my approach to writing an application is to break down those parts, is to kind of reflect back the question to the reader. So the development opportunity, what is it that you really, really want to do? So to really summarize in the first paragraph, what is it, that development opportunity? I just said, okay, over 6 months, I want to expand my experience as a curator. I want to focus my ideas in view of developing a new commissioning program. I then went on to say, I want to use this opportunity to really configure a step change in my work that focuses on how art can play a vital role in the development of systemic transformation. And I think you're really describing in this, that sort of passion that you have for shifting your career, your pathway into a new place within your practice. So that could mean you're an artist who has been working in a certain context and wants to kind of shift their work, like this artist I was explaining, to kind of, look at, you know, making work in a kind of larger scale. There's materials that you're kind of really interested in using because you want to apply it to, you know, a body of work that hopefully will lead on to a series of exhibitions. But at this point, without being able to have that time to research and focus your ideas, you're not able to kind of progress to that next stage. So that gave me space and time to do that research. It's given me space and time over the pandemic also. So that's a kind of question that, you know, you may be thinking about. How do you approach this given we're in this context? Is that, you know, working from your place of work, be it in your studio or in your bedroom or your kitchen table or in your office, is, you know, is time to kind of really, you know, research, read, and delve into new ideas and making as well. It's really about that step change. You know, what do you really want to achieve? What is it about? Like I said at the beginning, holding you back somewhat. Sorry for the noise in the background. You know, holding you back somewhat. You know, moving on to the next stage. It could be that you work in a collective group of people, but you've got this interest in a certain area of work and you really want to kind of gain more experience in it to actually be able to contribute further to this collective. Or you could be an artist that, you know, is making work and you're interested in creating more of a kind of a commercial opportunity for your practice. So how do you go about that? Do you work with a mentor? Could you work with a producer? Could you work with a curator to help inform your work and your ideas to be able to kind of expand your field of networks, expand your ideas of understanding perhaps how the commercial art world works, using that space and time to kind of really investigate what is important to you as a creative practitioner. I think it's important if I explain the budget and how to go about the budget, was that, and it's really important to show the working costs in your budget. With the artistic and creative costs, I included each of the individual areas that I was working on. So I had Create London, work experience with Create London, 20 days at my fee rate, which is £200. And I'd be going up to London. So I calculated that and the amount. I described exactly that narrative that I've just explained. Then I included travel from Bristol to London, the amount of journeys I was going to make, the accommodation, the amount of nights that I knew I was going to be in London, the mentor fee for Clod Ensemble to talk to Susie Wilson, 3 sessions at £300. Good fee, hey, that's not bad. And desk space. So again, the equivalent amount of time, well, actually 10 days desk space at the fee that I pay myself. And then some travel for studio visits to go and talk to artists as well. With then being in contact with the mentor, the organisation, they gave me a sense of what the programme would look like. So I was able to outline that in the project plan. So step by step, I worked through different opportunities that they'd suggested that I'd be working on and considering. So I kind of could articulate to the assessor that I'd really researched actually what my kind of plan of work over the 6 months would look like, including the mentoring time with Susie, where we'd have the first session about visioning my idea, the second session about looking at the reality of the program, and also the third session about creating my kind of, I call a sort of kind of cultural enterprise plan, the plan for myself to build a kind of, you know, a project and commissioning program. And then, you know, the period of time that I'd be at my desk doing the desk space, but I, you know, basically included a month sort of kind of, I didn't have X date I'll be doing that. I had between the 1st of April to the 1st of May, I'd be at my desk doing this kind of type of work that I'd expressed I was going to, what I was going to do and how I was going to approach it. So it kind of really, hopefully, seamlessly kind of, from reading the application, you can see in the project plan that I'd really clearly given myself a framework, but actually really understood each area that I needed to achieve as well. The attachments, I believe, are a way for the assessor to read from someone who genuinely understands your work. And I actually got an artist to write about my practice, and we'd spoken on the phone. They know about my work. We've worked very closely together, and that artist described, and it was a really nice experience, I think, for just being able to have that feedback and reflective kind of conversation, but then to see that they'd really listened and then articulated it in the letter. But it's a space for the assessor to really understand the step change, the opportunity that you're creating for yourself to be able to move forward in your work. It just helps, you know, that kind of, that other perspective and someone else kind of really thinking about your work. And for you, they might be an artist, another artist that knows your work really well, or a curator that you've worked with. Think of that person that actually can clearly support your application and has got your back, basically. You know, it's about that. It's about kind of thinking about all of the people that you've worked with and where that moment of real kind of exchange happened, and that, you know, you really kind of have supported each other. You can either do it in different ways. You can have a portfolio online. I did it, I attached 4 pages of the projects actually that I'd spoken about in the first question about my work, because I think that really helped kind of articulate further what these projects achieved, where it shifted some social transformation, it created opportunities, and artists that I'd worked with. So I was able to kind of hopefully help the assessor understand my kind of career path and history and real interest in the subject that I wanted to research further as well. I just reflect a bit on academic language. I suggest not to, if you're an academic writer or of that experience, to really unpick that approach and to really reflect, really to write in a kind of open, plain English language. Because the assessors aren't usually, well, sorry, the assessors are not all necessarily art form experts. So the assessor may be right from a different art form. So they may not really understand the kind of processes or the kind of articulation of sort of contemporary art practice in the way that a visual arts officer, relationship manager might do. So it's really important to kind of ask and invite someone who knows your work to just read the application and to reflect back to you that, you know, it makes sense, and there's a clear thought process through the application as well. I believe it's a year. It's 12 months that you have to work within. Yes, you can. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, you can. That's one of the demonstrate your work either as a web link or an attachment. I don't have a website, so I included an attachment. No, it's important that that individual has a good understanding of your work and can really reflect your work back to the assessor, so can help articulate your career history, what your work is about, and how that this experience will help the step change that you need to take place in your work. It's not important to reflect Arts Council's priorities in your own. No, absolutely not. As they would in project grants, no, because it's about your career development. That's a good question. Yes, I mean, I think if you're working with groups of people or individuals and they're part of the work, absolutely we're good to pay for them for their time, because that's the research that you're kind of involved with. Absolutely, that's a really good point. Yes, you can include materials and equipment. Absolutely. IT is a big one. I think applications more than computers. I think you'd actually have to check that with the criteria, because I think you'd be using a big chunk of the money to buy a computer with it. So I think I think double check the criteria there. I'm not so sure, but I know definitely you'd be able to apply for an application that you need to use, to design or make things through a computer. I think, given the situation and the pandemic, travel hopefully can take place at a certain time, but it's perhaps worth including in your time plan, if you intend to travel, how you'll deal with the risk of COVID-19. And if you're going to go somewhere now, then actually you'll have to isolate for a period of time. So it's kind of building in all of that into your application. Absolutely, it is. Collaborations are accepted. If you're a collaboration partnership, then that is your work, and you're applying as that collaboration. So absolutely, you can. They don't accept fees for any kind of undergraduate, postgraduate course, but if it's a workshop or a course to learn new skills, then yes. It's not about being entirely established. You could be at an emerging part in your career. It could be, you know, a point to shift you on to kind of developing a new body of work, to write an application that establishes that kind of passion, and how you can, you know, how you want to kind of develop as an artist, I think is important as well to kind of to apply for. But they are looking for that shift and step change. So how will it really support that kind of your creative practice to grow? And I think it's really kind of keeping that sort of in your front of your mind of what this funding is about. You have to fill out an evaluation, which is part of the process. It's not long and extensive, so it's just sort of part of the kind of what you've achieved, how you went about it, and how you think it's really supported your practice. You get the last part of your fee by giving an overview of what you've done. Yes, you're able to plan to travel abroad as part of your project. Absolutely. Get that international travel in. Let's Create scheme is really it's actually Arts Council's agenda for the next 10 years. They're really interested in international work. And you don't have to reflect that as in the application as their policy, but they're really, just to let you know, interested in international work as well. I think if it's an intense period of research that you need to do, then 10 weeks is absolutely fine as well. And you're really explaining kind of what that intensity is about, and for what reason it's such a short space of time. Then it really kind of, you're really telling the assessor that the need is kind of great, and it's imminent, and it's kind of it has to happen now. No, it's purely about their funding, paying you to do what you want to do. Develop your creative practice doesn't include any other income.